Good afternoon. We are talking about leadership and context and considerations and what it takes to be a good leader and differentiate between leaders and managers and approaches to leadership. And we're going to jump into chapter 3 here in just a minute and talk about the leader-member exchange and relationship building. So, but first, as I did and when I started chapter 2, these chapters build on each other. So one of the main takeaways from chapter 1 was, always observe like the leader follower context, and especially context and how important it is. And again, as we go through this, and we're trying to help you build a toolbox to help you be a successful leader, always look at these. I mean, these are suggestions. To me, leadership is definitely not etched in stone. A lot of different opportunities, a lot of different approaches. And to me, context and the situation that you find yourself in as you kind of work your way up through the leadership ladder, especially in a corporation, the context and situation really drive your approach. And as I've said many times, one of the keys to being a great leader is how flexible you are. Because what works today in one functional area in a company, if you get promoted into another completely different area, which happens in a lot of corporations, it's a different animal. And I've worked in IT, I've worked in medical economics, I've worked in network management, payment integrity, operations, clinical effectiveness, and medical management. And trust me, what works in one functional area may not always work in that next one. And you've got to be flexible, and you've got to be willing to try new things and new approaches. And if they don't work and you go back and look at them and you evaluate them and they're just, I don't think they're going to work on this one, but it's not a bad idea. I'm going to keep it for my next stop. And so that's the way I would approach this leadership class. We're providing you with opportunities, providing you with information, and hopefully you'll be able to pick and choose and develop your leadership style and your leadership capabilities as you go along. So let's go back to chapter 2, and they talked about what makes a good leader, and they talk about physical characteristics and emotional characteristics. And I think they finally decided, at least academics have, that emotional characteristics may be a lot more important than the physical characteristics. And when we're talking about emotional characteristics, the text talked about psychological capital, self and other awareness. They had a motive profile, character, complexity, paradoxical nature, and all of those play an active role in how you're going to adapt to different challenges along as you're working through that continuum of leadership styles and opportunities. I think all of those do play a part. What they kind of started to boil it down to was, when you're talking about leadership, behaviors, and they talked about just generalized leader behaviors, and they talked about leaders either being task-oriented or relations-oriented. And I've worked in, as I said, a multitude of different areas across the healthcare space and continuum. And some, especially if you're in operations, you may be faced with more operational and more task-oriented. And if you're in network management and medical management, especially when you're talking about outside of your organization, you may be more relations-oriented. And I think I don't want to say there's a fine line, but it's give and take on those kind of generalized leader behaviors, because it is definitely going to depend on where you work. If you are in a sales organization, then maybe relationships is the key driver. Or if you're in an organization that's trying to build membership, or if you're an organization that's trying to establish relationships with different client bases. Let's say you're some type of a vendor, IT vendor, healthcare vendor, a multitude of different vendors out there that are trying to develop niches in certain markets. And I would say that relationship, and the relations that you develop with your clients is probably more important than being task-oriented. But you have to actually take a step back and look at it and make that decision for yourself as you go along. And then they talked about decision making, and I don't know, they talked about delegating, they talked about consulting, they talked about, being autocratic. And I think I've always tried myself to be more consulting, maybe more I guess team building, and reaching out to a team to try to sell your ideas to them, and then get them to buy in on your ideas. And at that point, once you get them to buy in on your ideas based on the rationale that you give them and the data that you present to them, then you can make the decision. There have been certain instances, and Blue Cross Blue Shield was one of those instances where I inherited a team. I inherited obviously multiple teams from different functional areas of the company to build payment integrity out. And there were just a lot of those individuals, especially managers, that had just been so used to doing things a certain way that even though you tried to build some kind of a consensus among the managers, there were certain decisions I just had to be autocratic about it. I could tell it wasn't going to work, and you just have to bite the bullet. It was a process, and maybe a new process, revised process that the CFO wanted, or one of the other C-suite managers wanted, and it kind of flowed downhill to me, and I had to make the decision, and I took the autocratic process. So again, very few times, especially in Buffalo, but have been very few times actually over my career that I've ever been able to really completely delegate. I've had individuals that wanted to hone their leadership skills, and I've been able to delegate with them, and they are constantly give and take. What do you think about this? Or I tried this and this didn't work, and I wonder why. And those are I don't want to say rare occurrences, but a lot of individuals don't want to take the responsibility of having projects completely delegated to them, because they don't want to, again, assume the responsibility of making a mistake. And that's just part of growing as a professional and growing in the leadership space, is everybody makes mistakes. We all make mistakes. I certainly have made mistakes along the way, but you learn from those mistakes. And it's that learning, growing, opportunity that makes good leaders. And then finally, they talk about leading with love, and they're talking about their making the workplace fun and keep everybody. You want the happy meter cranked up as high as it can go. And I've had some managers that have worked for me in the past, and I've actually some directors that have worked for me in the past, and that was all they cared about. They wanted everybody to come in, have a big time, enjoy work, and everybody, when it came quitting time, go home. They, didn't want to have to worry about financial goals, didn't have to worry about definitive goals. They wanted goals really gray and obtuse and, complex to the point that you couldn't even measure them. And because they used that was always their out when they couldn't reach a goal. But once you started rolling metrics out to them, and especially financial and definitive metrics where it's black or white, you either hit your metric or you didn't. That's where it got really ugly with some of these managers, because that just was not in their psyche. They wanted everybody to have fun, and they wanted everybody to look forward to coming to work. And I think if you look at these kind of three general types of behavior, I think you get to the point that it is a combination of the three. And again, it goes back to context. What does your immediate supervisor want? Because whatever your immediate supervisor wants is what his or her immediate supervisor wants, and everything in a corporation kind of flows downhill. And if you are giving a set of goals and parameters, for the first of the year, and say you've got to accomplish these by the end of the year, at some point you have to make some really difficult decisions, and you may not be popular, but that's just part of being a leader. And then as they kind of jump into chapter 3, they talk about leadership is largely about forming and maintaining relationships over time with individuals who the leader is attempting to influence. And I think that is a very valid statement. You're building relationships because you hope those relationships you can use in some form or fashion to influence other leaders that have resources that you need to get from point A to point B. And I think that is a very valid statement. They talk about leaders' influence, relationship building is pivotal to being able to influence others. And, to talk about peers. Let's say you're a director in an organization, your peers are going to be the other directors in the organizations. If you're looking at supervisors, it's going to be the next level up. Maybe the next level up is executive director, or the next level up is, associate vice president, whatever that next level is. You're trying to influence not only that group, but even up into the area of senior management. You're trying to develop relationships so that you can influence individuals to help you get from point A to point B. If you're in, sales, or if you're in health plans, you're probably working with a provider network. So you've got to build relationship with the providers that are providing goods and services to the covered population that you're serving. So you have to be diligent about how you build relationships with your customers. And then lastly, and to me, maybe the most important, because it's going to help you be successful, as you have these relationships and you have to try to build them so that you can influence your followers, make sure the followers are on the same page with you. And then they talk about contact with followers. If I think about all of the leadership positions I've had, I've never had the opportunity to build a unit from scratch. In other words, I've never had the opportunity to build out a new unit where I could interview everybody coming into that unit and make the decision either yes or no, I want them on the team for that unit. My I guess experience has been either in a new company, a new job, or a new position within the current company. I've always been inheriting individuals, either inheriting individuals, or if I have some openings within, if I've been approved to TBH to be hired, some of those type positions, I'm always getting. And I guess it's because the other leaders have built relationships to some extent. I'm always getting individuals trying to help shift some of their individuals to my team. And you have to be really careful there, because the first question you have to ask yourself is, why are they so eager to get rid of this individual on their team and get them to work for you? Also, instances, with what they call C-suite, or the upper, senior management, you'll get emails and phone calls from them. They'll say, hey, I hear you're starting this unit, or you've accepted the responsibility of managing this unit or leading this team, and I've got an individual that's going to be great, and they're looking for an opportunity to grow, and said, how about taking them on? And so you're put in a situation where it's great if you can be involved in the selection process. But you place it into context where followers already exist, and to me that's the higher probability if you're going into the leadership space. Is every time you change jobs, every time you change companies, maybe, or jobs within the same corporation, or if you inherit a team, you are inheriting what's there, and it's up to you to figure out, do they fit with the team or my team concept? Do you think they will fit and help, manage the team and, get from point A to B and accomplish our goals? And there's a lot of opportunities out there, but it's, I don't know. I've always taken, the approach is I spend, hopefully the first 3 to 6 months in a new position, just listening, learning, trying to absorb what has happened in the past, sharing information, sharing my vision. I'm not one that's going to shoot from the hip and go in and, say, because they talk about, that love or hate relationship, love or hate at first sight. We're not talking about, it's not a dating site. It's you're trying to build a team. And I always try to be a little patient, because some individuals that when you first meet them, you think, man, they're just not going to make it. They're just not cut out, and I just don't think they're a fit. But after, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, you start thinking, well, they're not as bad as I thought they were. They're better producers. They really know what they're doing. Yeah, they've got some rough edges and, maybe a little, social quirks, which, I mean, we've all got social quirks, and you find yourself thinking, well, I think they can actually be a good team member. And if you had shot from the hip when you first met them, you might have lost a very valuable team member. So that's what they talk about, talking about relationships developing over time. And you're talking about favorable versus, non-favorable relationships. And what I can, from my experience, it's keep an open mind, be patient, and give yourself an opportunity to at least try to get to know the individuals. May not you have time to get to know them on a personal level, but at least get to know what their skill set is and, whether you think they can accomplish the jobs that you're set before you. And then kind of secondarily to that, so that kind of, love or hate at first sight, then they jump into this leader-member exchange. And it's, they use the acronym LMX. And I can honestly say that I've been in a lot of leadership seminars, gone to classes, taken credentialing, and this is the first time I've ever run across this leader-member exchange, this LMX. Some of the concepts they talk about, yeah, I've seen those in other leadership seminars, and you've come across them, and some of them I've tried, and some of them I haven't, but I've never heard it phrased and structured, and I guess an infrastructure that's kind of absorbed in this LMX. But as you kind of read through it, you think, well, some of this is a good idea, and some of it, at least in my experience as leader, I'm not sure it would work. I wouldn't mind trying it if I get the opportunity, but I don't know. I'm just, again, going to try to keep an open mind as we work through it, because the leader-member exchange is the manner in which relationship between leaders and followers forms or evolves, how a follower assumes roles, how the leader acts or responds towards the follower, and the chemistry that occurs. And to me, that seems pretty straightforward. Again, I've never heard it phrased with that acronym or that kind of structure, but it's you see it a lot in different leader seminars and training sessions. It's just this one, they're just phrasing it a little differently. And because they talk about followers play a key role in LMX, and then they keep throwing out this this saying, it takes two to tango. Well, yeah, it does take two to tango. Sometimes it takes 3 or 4 to tango, but it's the structure that they're going to pitch in chapter 3. And as you go through it, I think if you keep an open mind, you will see some of these concepts that you've either heard of before, that you've used in your leadership style. If you're, and I'll use the term a non-traditional, student and taking this class, you're already out in the workforce, and maybe you've had several years experience in leading teams. So, think about it as you read through this and listen to the notes and watch the videos and think about, well, I wonder if that would have worked for me in this situation, or that sounds really good. I might try that with, over the next 2 or 3 months. So we're going to kind of wrap it up there. We've gone through a review. We've kind of given the preface of the LMX, and when we come back, we're going to dig a little deeper into LMX, and then we'll see if it really works for you. That's it for this first segment of chapter 3, and I'll talk to everybody in a few minutes. Thank you.